Look, great to have you here. First of all, you're not running in these local elections. Talk to us about, I guess, your experience just as a councillor yourself, and then why, I guess, you've decided to move on, noting, of course, certain circumstances coming up when certain candidate nominations need to be put in.
Yeah, look, it's been 16 years since I first contested a seat on Monash Council back in 2008. I was 19, so it's been, I guess, a long journey, 12 years serving, and it's very sad. I don't really want to be retiring, but nothing lasts forever, and you have to sort of make a decision at some stage. So, I'm going out on a high note. I've got a lot to be proud of here in Monash, and I think that, the future will include some sort of activity in the community, but probably in a different capacity.
We'll wait and see for that. On a broad level, before we get into some individual LGAs, what have you, I guess, observed from the campaign so far? Noting there's been a few significant changes, mainly with the electoral structure, which has affected a whole host of metropolitan councils, especially, and will make results very, very interesting to see. So, yeah, any overall observations from just before we start the votes?
Look, I think that there's less, involvement across Victoria in the election process from potential candidates. Candidate nominations are down on 2020 numbers. There's been a lot of non-contestable wards that have only one nominee. I think it's about 45 or even a bit more than that. I don't think that's a good sign. I think that it obviously means that people are apathetic to an extent. Putting that aside, certainly there are a lot of competitive contests across Victoria and in Melbourne, but I'd like to have seen more nominees in certainly every ward where there's a position available to have a contest. That's the whole point of having an election.
Yeah, and I mean, that's natural to happen with these single member wards. You're going to get these uncontested races, whereas, it's near impossible, or it's very unlikely with those multi-member wards. Just quickly, I just want to get your thoughts on this, because I believe it came in at the last election for candidates under the new Act, which was the mandatory candidate training. Now, I only looked into this the other day, but it seems pretty unusual that you've got the VEC, and again, they're following the legislation correctly, but retiring candidates who were found not to have completed this. They don't complete training, and then they're just either they're removed from the ballot, or if they're on the ballot, their preferences will immediately go somewhere else. I'm not aware of many other places where such a thing is in place. What do you make of it?
Look, it's a catch-22 for the VEC because they have to work within the Act, but the Act does have deficiencies, because what's happened at least one contest that I've seen, Leo, is a nomination has been accepted, and therefore the candidate's on the ballot, and then they're not eligible to be counted once the ballot papers are counted. So in theory, they can't be elected because they're not going to be counted in the first place. But I don't think that's in any way fair, particularly when there's at least a day or two before nominations close, and you can effectively, in theory, do the training in that time. The training is very quick. It's about an hour's worth of an online module. So I think that, look, unfortunately, people will be disadvantaged, and I think that's not a good thing broadly for the democratic process. But certainly, candidates have enough time to become familiar with the criteria to be eligible to be a candidate. You obviously have to be over 18 and all the rest of it, criminal conviction, that sort of thing, as they not have one. But also do the training, and I think unfortunately there's a bit of ignorance on the part of some candidates.
One final thing before we get into those individual LGAs is party endorsements, which are always interesting to watch, because you get a few minor parties that come in, the two socialist parties, Fusion's endorsing, the Greens are pretty widespread in their endorsements. Labor has gone for a couple places, I guess the typical areas, Yarra and Darebin. They're also in Whittlesea. And then I know the Liberal Party is endorsing for the first time for Melbourne City, which again is a pretty unique move. There really haven't been many Liberal endorsements for Victorian councils. There was Burwood Liberals in 2020, but it's been a bit odd. What do you, I guess make of that? And I guess the perception, which I think is at least somewhat widespread, that, party politics shouldn't be in local government, which we seem to hear pretty often.
News alert, it is in local government. It's been in local government for decades because we live in a democratic country and political parties exist. They have a role to play, I think an important one. My personal view has always been that the political party wants to endorse a candidate, they should. And if that candidate is on the ballot, it should say that they're endorsed on the ballot paper, the same way that we have at state and federal elections. It says, Theo Zographos Liberal, Leo, whatever you are, Leo, for example. At the moment, that doesn't exist, although if you're endorsed, you can say it in your candidate statement in local council elections in Victoria. And if you want to be independent, you definitely can. If you don't want to be endorsed, but you're a Liberal supporter or you're a party member, it should be transparent. You shouldn't be misleading the voters. But definitely, I do believe in the future that the Act should be amended to allow endorsed candidates to have their political party on the ballot paper. If you don't like it as a voter, you can vote for someone else that reflects your own values.
Yeah, and that is one of the more bizarre elements of these elections, that you don't have any affiliation on the ballots, which is pretty, again, unheard of in 21st century Australian elections. Also, nothing that requires candidates to disclose party membership if they're not endorsed, unlike in New South Wales, SA, Queensland, where there is mandatory disclosure. Moving on to some of these individual LGAs, we'll start with a big one, Melbourne City Council. You would have seen the town hall that took place with the majority of the Lord Mayoral candidates. Who do you think shaping up as the front runner? Because from what I've seen, we don't have any polling to go off, but based off the last results, I would say it's probably Nick Rees and Aaron Wood.
Yeah, I think Aaron Wood's taken a bit of a lead in the last few days. I think that when you look at the ticket as a whole, it's getting a lot of positive coverage. He's got a high-profile deputy Lord Mayor candidate. He's got an incumbent, Phil Lewis, his number one candidate for the councillor position, that is. Having said that, Nick Rees is the incumbent, but I don't think that his incumbency has been as strong as other incumbents in previous years, obviously because he's only been the Lord Mayor for 3 or so months, and I think his profile still is yet to go its full length. So I agree that it's between those two. I don't see anyone else winning the Lord Mayoralty, although if Aaron Wood was to win, he wouldn't have a majority on the council, so he'd have to work with probably some of the Nick Rees team councillors, as well as some other incumbents that are on there in other groups.
Yep, and some of those other incumbents, like I wouldn't be surprised if we potentially see Labor and the Greens on there again. Maybe someone from Team Cooter. It'll depend with the councillor races. And again, it is a bit of an oddity that you can't run for both leadership team and councillor, unlike other states. But that will be one to watch. Keeping in a city, Marybeck. Now that is one that's moving to single member wards, which is going to change things up. You have Labor Green endorsements there. You also have Socialist Alliance, which has 2 councillors, and the Victorian Socialists. The Fusion Party's also chosen to endorse there as well. Again, what do you make of that kind of race? Because Labor has had, I guess you could say, there was a bit of controversy with the last election that happened when it was Moreland, and the Socialist. I mean, it's the most dominant council anywhere in the country.
Yeah, look, hopefully there's no countbacks or recounts or any issues at Marybeck. I don't think there will be. But look, there's a few high-profile councillors at Marybeck. Oscar Yildiz comes to mind as a friend of mine, but also he will poll very strongly. Also, Lambros Cabanos, former mayor and current deputy mayor at Marybeck, will go very well. So I'm thinking that they will get re-elected. You've also got Angelica Anopoulos, who's a Greens endorsed candidate. I think she'll do very well. I think she'll get re-elected in her ward. We've already mentioned Lambros. There's also probably going to be Helen Davidson, who's a former deputy mayor at Marybeck. She's going to be in a contest, I think. I forget the ward now, I'm sorry, but it's definitely going to be something that will come down to the wire. And the makeup of the current council, there's no clear majority in this term. I think that will continue in the next term as well.
Yeah, we'll look at that. A sort of similar race in Darebin in terms of Labor Green endorsements there, and Socialists no incumbents, but do run. I'll note Darebin, its second election on single member, so it's no change for them. We've seen that at the last election, and so I guess no dramatic surprises maybe. But what have you observed out of there?
Apparently, there's been some dirty tricks, some negative campaigning against some of the incumbent Greens councillors without, the transparent, I guess, acknowledgement of who's behind them. So it's getting nasty in some wards there. There's a very well-known, I guess, grouping between the incumbent Greens and also some of the Labor Party councillors and MPs in that area. And they're very, I guess, competitive when it comes to the controls of Darebin Council. So look, I think Susan Newton, who's current mayor, is a very good councillor, even though we disagree on our party politics. I'd like to see her get re-elected. But also, Darebin has always been competitive as well, and there'll be a mix of independents. I expect at least one Liberal independent will get up in Darebin, but it's also likely that there'll be a plurality of Greens councillors as well.
Yeah, and something on the Greens, I guess, a bit broadly, and I observed this with the New South Wales local elections. You had the Better Councils group, which I guess was going after them over certain things related to votes about Palestine, which have been brought up in councils. We've seen that in a couple Greens area. We've seen that in Yarra, which I'll get to in just a moment. Do you think that could hurt the Greens in some areas, help them in other areas, just the way they've, I guess, gone about, and noting, of course, that the actions of state and federal Greens, that somewhat does reflect on the local Greens, because, I mean, it is all endorsed and openly endorsed, so it's pretty clear who the Greens are.
It will hurt them in the outer councils once you get far away from Melbourne CBDs. So Darebin is sort of, you will get some Conservative voters who will never really vote Greens anyway, that have I guess, some concerns about that type of activism in favour of the Palestinian state, or whatever you want to call it. But in Yarra, it will be the other way around, where you're seen to be fighting that particular attitude. It will be in your favour. I disagree with that sentiment, but I acknowledge political reality on the ground. And that will continue in Melbourne as well for their Greens ticket. Obviously, that's where the bandt's seat as well. So he's been, leading on these matters, and we know that there's going to be some activity this weekend coming up that will feed into that feeling as well.
Yeah, we'll observe what goes on there. Speaking of Yarra, right, and that's one that's really shaping up to be interesting. Labor was wiped out in 2020, and it used to be a stronghold for them. They had a majority when the council was first created. Now you've got both the Greens, who have had a number of councillors gone through either resignations or elections to Parliament. They got a majority at the last election, and only 9 wards there. And of course, the newcomer is Yarra for All. Now, it's a bit of a kind of vague group. There are some who are clearly affiliated, some who are a bit less so, but clearly just a lot of independent candidates, and Yarra for All, of course, being associated with the incumbent Stephen Jolly, who's been there since 2004, former in a number of socialist parties. Again, what do you make of that race, and how the Greens, as incumbents initially elected to a majority, will fare?
Yeah, look, they've sort of gone out on the limb and about the Palestinian matter that we spoke about, have said that they're going to, fight, I guess, the Israeli government's policy in regards to the current conflict. So I think that will probably get a lot of them re-elected. I think it's the wrong move. I think it will hurt the Greens elsewhere across the country, as well as in Victoria. But the current mayor, Ed Crossland's, been high profile on these matters. I think that he'll get re-elected. He'll get Stephen Jolly. Obviously will get re-elected as well, and he will get at least 2 others. I forget what ward Stephen Jolly's running in. I think it's the Killip ward. He'll get 1 or 2 others elected there. So I would say that the Greens will probably fall short of the majority this time around. But I would say that they might have more than Stephen Jolly's ticket. What's the other group called? One that you...
Yarra for All is Jolly's ticket, and then there's also Labor who's running.
Labor, yeah. So Labor will get one or two, but it's going to come down to Stephen Jolly and the Greens. And who knows, in the next term, they might be able to come to an agreement on a rotation on who becomes mayor, because although they disagree on a lot of procedural matters, I'd say that they probably agree on some policy matters here and there when it comes to council issues that they'll be working on.
Yep, Yarra, one of those that's gone to single member wards. I'll note, interestingly, again, despite it being previously dominant, Labor is only running in 3 wards, so they're not even attempting a majority, which is interesting. I think the understanding is basically they just can't find enough people who are able to run in this position. Again, very interesting considering the position they used to be in. We'll get to your area of Monash. Again, how's that shaping up? I know that you have some, or at least I think several Labor members there. I don't believe they're endorsed though, but yeah, go ahead. What's that area looking like?
Yeah, look, I mean, I haven't really been across it until recently. There will be 2 vacancies caused by my retirement and also Tennis Margia, this good friend, retiring as well. And there's been 1 no contest. So in Gallagher's ward, there's going to be there's only 1 nominee, so there'll be no election. That's Jeff Blake's ward. Jeff is the longest serving councillor here at Monash, so he would have been hard to beat anyway. I think that there's at least 3 contests here that will go down to the wire. The first one I'd say to you is Scotchman's Creek ward, where the current incumbent mayor, my friend Nikki Law, is being challenged by Liberal Party member Lou Shivarev, and they've both been campaigning pretty hard. If I had to guess, I'd say Nikki's got the upper hand due to incumbency, and she'll get preferences from the 3rd candidate. But that's going to be a contest because Lou's working very hard, door knocking, etc. You've also then got in Gels ward, Leo, where Tennis Margia is retiring. Marcus Fernandez was a Liberal Party member. He ran in 2020 and has been sort of active in the last 4 years and has been campaigning quite strongly the last few months. I think he's probably the more likely candidate to get elected. But you've also got Alicia Lee, who's been, mentored to an extent by Tina, and she'll be able to work off that as well. If we look down to University ward, Josh Burgess, who was up until August, I think, a member of the Greens and endorsed Greens councillor, is running in University ward, and although I think he'll get re-elected, there will be some candidates putting in a lot of work there. And that ward has a lot of students because it's obviously close to Monash University, and so it sort of will fit Josh's platform. It will be a contest. And just finally, we've got Wellington ward Waverley Park ward, my apologies, where Shane McCluskey, who's an independent councillor, is being challenged by Arat Muradian, who's Armenian, running in a highly Australian Armenian community. So I think he'll do well. One's a fiery, one's a police officer, and there's also a lot of, demographics that suit them in terms of those occupations, suiting a lot of residents that live in the area as well. So I think Labor will hold a majority on Monash Council, but they will definitely have to work with new people. And you never know, because the current Labor group have had it falling out to an extent in the last 4 years, and you never know if that will continue or hold into the new term.
Now, Casey's another interesting one because it's one of those councils that hasn't had an election in the last cycle, which makes comparing the results from 2016 a bit, at some level, a bit redundant, but it does make things interesting. What are we watching there?
We're looking to see whether there's any people that served on that council previous to 2016 or thereabouts who are recontesting. And I can see in Corrie Ward, we've got Gary Rowe, who served on that council and also served in State Parliament in Cranbourne. He's contesting the ward that he was well known in, and I think he'll get re-elected. He's still very much active in the community there as well, with local community groups and the community bank, etc. As far as I can see, there are a few people who have contested Casey Council elections previously, but no other people who have served on the council, people like the previous mayor, Susan Saray, and others like that. So it will be, by and large, a new leaf for Casey, in the sense that a big majority of the positions will be to people that have not served previously. But I think it's also very good that we're having an election in Casey, because I don't believe in sacking councils anyway. I think we should leave that to the voters. But when we do, we should have an election as soon as possible, so that we can, make the voters really in charge of councils.
Yeah, it's always interesting when they, if they do get the sack. And again, you just think of how much has happened since the last election, right? We saw a similar instance in I'll just circle back to New South Wales, in Central Coast, where there's like 350,000 people and their council has been sacked for about almost 5 years at this point, and just got another election. So that's always one to watch. Moonee Valley. Now, my understanding is Labor does, or at least in 2020, did run there, mostly independents, though, or officially independents, for what I'm seeing, just from my list. Any observations there?
Yeah, look, there will be some Labor factional contests happening here, and obviously this sort of overlaps into the Maribyrnong federal seat, where there was some issues with parachuting candidates in the light of Bill Shorter's retirement. Look, I do recognise some names from Liberal Party, so someone like Hamish Jones, I believe, is a member of the Liberal Party. And then there are people like Narelle Sharp, who's a former mayor, she'll get re-elected. Johnny Sypek, who's a former mayor at Moonee Valley as well, formerly of the Labor Party. I think he might have let his membership lapse, but he'll get re-elected. And then we've got in Queen's Park Ward, the incumbent Ava Adams, I think, will face a contest. I don't know her party politics, to be fair, but that's there are multiple candidates there. I think 7 candidates, so she'll probably face an uphill battle to get re-elected. And also you've got Piers Tyson, who was mooted to stand in Maribyrnong as well. The current mayor has had some, domestic politics issues with other councillors in recent weeks. He's been getting a lot of attention, running, I think, against another incumbent, Samantha Byrne, in Still Creek Ward. So you don't see too many incumbents running against each other in councils in Victoria. So obviously that's going to be really interesting as well.
Yeah, definitely. Those two incumbents, it really does change the race. And as you say, right, not a common phenomenon, but maybe we're seeing it with some of the single member changes. Again, lots changing there. That it's all a bit unknowns at the moment. Just keep it moving forward. Windom has been interesting, because I remember a couple elections ago, it had a ridiculous amount of candidates for its multi-member wards, which caused some issues. And it kind of got a bit more normal in 2020. I believe, again, moving to single member. What are we seeing out there?
Yeah, I know some of these people who are Liberal Party members running in what is a growth area. We know that at a state level, particularly when the next election comes in 2 years, these seats that have a large Labor majority on paper, but we know that they're going to be competitive. So people like Preet Singh standing in Denman Ward, I know will have a good following. As you said, there's a lot of candidates. The primary votes won't be high, but you will see a lot of candidates getting up after the exclusion of candidates in the preference run. There's obviously a large multicultural makeup amongst the candidate names that reflect the makeup of Windom. So in regards to incumbents, I believe, I think the majority of them are recontesting, if you correct me, Leo, but definitely...
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you see 1 or 2 recounts at Windom, because it'll be really, really close results. And I think we may not know the results in Windom for at least 2 or 3 weeks after election day.
Kingston's one that was moved to single member in 2020, so no changes for the ward structure there. And from what I've looked at least the council that was elected last time seemed to be almost evenly split between independents, Labor members, and Liberal members. We going to observe anything interesting there?
Yeah, so they've had a retirement this year, so they've gone down to 10 or 9 councillors, I forget now. Steve Stakos is now the State Secretary of the Labor Party. There'll be at least 2 incumbents re-elected without any issues. So we've got Party Saab will get re-elected. He's got 1 opponent, but he'll get 60 to 70% of the primary vote. And then you've got a few retirements that are not recontesting. So Tam Beasley and George Gua won't recontest. That opens up their seats. You've got the Labor Party members, of which I've already mentioned Hardy Saab, but you've got Georgina Oxley and David Eden. They're facing tough contests, although I think Georgina Oxley will be okay. David Eden's going to face a fight to get re-elected. Sorry, I correct myself. Party Saab has a few other candidates against him, but I believe he's going to be quite strong. You will have the former Deputy Mayor, Chris Hill. He'll face a contest as well. You've got a number of candidates in Malaluka ward, of which I believe they're all non-incumbents, so they're all sort of new. So we have at least 1 councillor new there. And then you've got in Wattle ward, I believe that the incumbent mayor will get re-elected. She's got quite high name ID, although there are a number of candidates contesting there. And as I said, you've also got the Labor group won't be able to agree on everything moving forward. So there'll be a unique, majority group in Kingston regardless, because in the previous council, the one that's ending now, you did have Labor and Liberal councillors working together on many things. And you also had a few of those independents who were not aligned to anyone, also as part of that majority.
And just finally, Bayside, on paper, it's all independent, which, can look a bit boring at times. The Greens have had a crack there before. Sustainable Australia's got involved, and there have been some Liberals running. Anything exciting there to conclude?
Well, you've got Jeff Lee trying to make a comeback. He was a Liberal MP in the 80s and 90s, a state MP, initially in Melbourne, then in Mordialloc, and now he's standing in Bayside Council. He's been very vocal on the SRL and some of his concerns around that project and how it's impacting on the Bayside Council. You've also got in Dendy Ward the high-profile businessman Hannah El Mulalim, who's the owner of the Dendy Cafe and Restaurant. He's been challenged by Michael Heffernan, who actually lost by a few dozen votes in 2020 and trying to make a comeback to defeat Mr. Ali. So we hope that it won't be, as up in the air as it was last time, where there was a recount of sorts. But I think that you've got a number of candidates in Bayside. Preferences are going to be key. And although they're independents on paper, I do know that the Liberal Party are running a number of party members across those wards as well.
Yeah, well, look, be really interesting to see how everything goes. I think you've got probably some of the most insight of anyone watching these Victorian local government elections. So really, really appreciate your time, and we will, I'm sure, catch up as results come through whenever it is. It's all via post, but look forward to talking then. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Liv.